Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. I have the lovely Dr. Carrie Jones on today. She is the queen of hormones, integrated perimenopause, menopause, all of these cool things. She's also absolutely hilarious if you've ever seen her Instagram. And then we're going to dive into everything hormones. Talk soon. See you in the podcast. Dr. Jones, welcome to the show.
Oh my gosh, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We've become friends over probably about a year, so I'm excited to dive into things that I don't know about you. First question, obviously the most important, is why are hormones like herding cats?
Why are hormones like herding cats?
Yes, you've made this famous, so now I need context.
Yes, because especially in the female body, hormones change a little bit every single day. And so for the average woman who's struggling with hormonal issues, symptoms, it can feel like herding cats because every day something feels a little bit different. And every day the signaling is a little bit different. And if you've ever used the expression, it feels like herding cats, when I say that, women are like, yep, that's what it is. That's what it feels like. I can never put my finger on it because it's always changing.
I'm assuming, I'm not a woman, so this is my assumption, and I've been around women, I know women. The most frustrating thing on earth is not knowing or having to re-guess or redo things. So there's no consistency in how you can approach your health and how you can discover how to approach your health. Obviously, there's other tools we can get into now, but what is your specific approach when you're getting them to a spot where we can be like, hey, listen, there is a path forward? Maybe touch on like maybe how you do a protocol or how you would approach women that are in these states and frustrated.
Absolutely. A lot of it is foundations. And I think, of course, we're all looking for next day shipping. We're looking for the instantaneous, right? So they say, what herb is the best? What hormone replacement is the fastest? What's going to get me my desired outcome as quickly as possible? Because that's what I'm used to when I order something online, or that's what I'm used to if I take something like ibuprofen or an antibiotic. But so they're looking for these quick fixes, completely forgetting that they're living their life in the fast lane. They're not sleeping. They're drinking too much alcohol. They're underhydrated. They're not getting enough protein. They sit down all day and don't move a whole lot. They're not happy in some or all of their relationships. They haven't seen the sun in a long time. Just some of these things that play a huge role in how hormones do or don't work, how the brain communicates for a hormone to come out and play. And so a lot of what I center around is pretty boring and pretty basic when it comes to these foundations.
Isn't that kind of a direct correlation to everything in life? Like
everything in life.
Usually it's like you need to nail the basics and keep doing them, yet you forget after a month and then you're frustrated and so you complicate things even more.
Yes. And it's just like, I was talking to a girlfriend of mine the other day and she was talking about a certain problem she had in a relationship. And she was making the problem exponentially more complicated. And I just thought, as the outsider looking in, I said, this is the problem. It's this foundational thing. And she was like, oh, I forgot about that. But we do it in everything. Of course we do it in our health. If somebody says, I'm so tired all the time, I'm so tired, what herb, what nutrient, what thing will help me not be tired? Is there a peptide for fatigue? And I go, well, how many hours do you sleep at night? And they're like, sleep? I don't sleep. I can't fall asleep. I can't stay asleep. My kid wakes me up. My partner does. I have sleep apnea, whatever it is. I'm like, well, a peptide's not going to give the energy you need. You don't even sleep in the first place. So we have to go back to the basics, that root cause effect.
Yeah. In the situation where basics aren't working, because I'm going to assume, you could correct me if I'm wrong, they do the basics, things are still off. How would you approach that? Because maybe some people listening be like, okay, look, Dr. Jones, first of all, you're calling me out personally. So the next month I will do the basics, which is obviously we're both rolling our eyes going, that's not enough, but at least a good start. But let's just say somebody's actually been diligent. Maybe they worked with a practitioner such as yourself that's very competent. They believe and trust in you. Things just are not going their way. What would be maybe some of the paths you would take to explore further? And is there like a specific, maybe it would be not peptides first, but like, let's do other types of testing.
Yes.
Walk us through maybe how you would do that.
Yes. So if I have somebody who says, okay, I've been really diligent, I've been following the foundations, and maybe they're getting 50% better, but not 100% better. even then, depending what symptoms they bring to me or their family history or what's been going on, I definitely believe in some sort of lab testing. Fatigue is a great example if we go back to that. Someone says, I'm so tired. So then we start working on their sleep, but at the same time, they say, I haven't had lab work in 10 years. All right, let's get some basic lab work down, because what I would hate to miss is not only are they not sleeping, but they're also anemic. But I wouldn't know that unless I did lab work. Or maybe at the same time, they're going on to develop a hypothyroid problem. I wouldn't know that unless I tested them. The same goes for hormonal things. Somebody says, my periods are very irregular, random. I don't know when they're going to come. And yes, my foundations are a mess. So working on the foundations, and still things aren't looking good. So we do lab work and come to find out their prolactin, which is a different hormone, is a little high, and that will impact their cycle. Maybe they have PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. So I do love to layer in lab work because I want to use it, especially if the foundations are getting me partway there, but not all the way there. And or if they're bringing up something else where I'm thinking, oh, we need to test that while you're doing the foundational changes. Let's wait for this lab testing to come back and see what happens. And some of the lab test is quick, a blood test. I can have back in a couple days. Some of it takes longer. Let's say somebody's having all sorts of GI symptoms, gas, bloating, constipation, heartburn, diarrhea. I choose to do some sort of stool testing. That's going to take longer to come back. But what's great is it gives us time of like, let's start laying these foundations while we're waiting for the rest of the data to come in, and then we'll adjust as necessary.
Awesome. When people are looking for a practitioner to have these conversations with, what would be your advice on how to find one that they resonate with, that they can trust? Because I think nowadays there's a lot of polarity, right? You should be carnivore, no veganism is better for you. And like, then it becomes tribal because you're like, okay, I believe in this and it helped me, so everyone else is wrong. And then everyone's now also creating content, and I think people just get really overwhelmed. And I think you're such a professional voice that makes things funny to resonate, which is amazing, right? But I think people would appreciate maybe your viewpoint on how they would go about choosing somebody to work with to help them out, to get back on the basics, because we know they're not doing those. But then outside of that, extra things like labs and data.
First thing is ask the people around you. So, for example, if you feel like crap and somebody you work with, a family member, a friend, a Facebook group you're in is like, oh my gosh, I was feeling that way too, and this is who I saw, then it's do your due diligence. Look them up. We all have the keyboard at our fingertips. We all have our phone or computer. We are all probably pretty good at looking things up and stalking. So start evaluating that clinic, that group, that practice, that person, that practitioner, and see if they may be a good fit. Sometimes some practitioners offer like a 15-minute intro. You can schedule your call. Other times they can't, and you just have to make the appointment and see. But what you're looking for somebody is when you read their website and you read their bio, where you read the things they've published, their blogs, their accreditations, does that resonate with you? It's going back to, what does your gut tell you? What feels good? If your sister saw somebody and you don't agree with anything they're telling your sister, you're probably not going to go see them. But if your best friend sees somebody and they're doing better, feeling better, you're like, wow, those recommendations seem really easy or really straightforward, or I could do those too. Then look them up, make sure, do your due diligence, and then make that appointment. There are a lot of great ways now, just because we have the internet at our fingertips, that we can find a practitioner that would work. And because a lot of practitioners can practice across state lines, you may find a great practitioner 4 states away from you because they have that ability. You'll just see them online on something like Zoom. And so what trips people up when I talk to them is they're like, well, I don't even know where to start. I'm like, start asking around. Start asking your community. Start asking at work. Are you in any groups? Start asking in your groups. I'm even in one of those like neighborhood app groups, that's by your city, and people will post about this is for sale or this got stolen or what the store's going out of business. But I've absolutely seen people in there post like, I need a new dentist, or I need a pediatric this, or I'm looking for this kind of surgeon, and immediately there's a lot of recommendations, and you just have to look them up. So it's not a very straight arrow in finding the perfect practitioner, and like anything, you may have to go through a couple of them but it's not as secret or hidden as you think. You just have to open the door and start asking around.
I think that actually that last point is such a good barometer of success to people, because I think everyone's like, I chose somebody that had good recommendations. I didn't resonate with them. Life sucks. I shouldn't have a practitioner and go back to what I'm doing. It's like, well, hang on.
Yeah.
I don't even think I've ever shared this, but there was a point in my life where I decided to see a therapist for certain things that I wanted to work through. And I remember I went to one and I immediately hated her. I was like, I'm never going back there again. But to your point, I was like, I'm going to find another one. And I was like, the point is I want to solve some problem. And just because the first solution wasn't the one, I didn't stop, right?
And that goes with anything in your life. If you buy paint at the store to paint your living room and you don't like the color, do you just go, that's it, I'm not painting, I give up, I'm never doing it again?
Right.
Of course not. You're going to go back to the store and figure out what color paint you want. If you hire somebody to, do all the leaves in your yard in the autumn time and they don't show, or they do a half job, like, what are you going to say? I'm never hiring anybody again. Of course not. You're going to now be like, well, they didn't work. I won't go back to them or use them or recommend them, but I will continue to find somebody who can collect all the leaves in my yard and take care of it if you have a lot of trees. But with medicine, for some reason, we are given the message that if it doesn't work the first time, you stop.
Yeah.
Right? If you don't like your primary care, you don't have a choice. You have to go back. It's like,
Right.
No, gosh, that's not true at all. You are in charge. It's full autonomy is yours.
Yeah. Great points. I did want to reel us back a little bit, because we're kind of tongue in cheek saying nobody does the basics, like we're being very tongue in cheek. But I think being a little bit more serious, like the reality is nowadays, I think it's harder for people to do the basics because everyone else is telling them they don't need to, right? They're seeing every advertisement is get this cheaper, faster, sugary thing that is available at every corner, wherever you live, like all the big food. You don't really have to do anything. Just take these drugs and you'll lose weight. That's being marketed everywhere. Supplements, everywhere, everything. There's a supplement for everything. So to be fair to people, they're getting absolutely bombarded with things that are promising them the world. And no matter how many times they get maybe screwed over, human nature is, I want to do it faster.
Yeah.
Without doing any work.
Yeah.
Today. Right. So can you share with us, what is your approach when working with people to get them out of those, dopamine ridden, like even social media, which we'll get into in a bit. It can be amazing. Like you can follow awesome people. They create content for free. There's people like willingly sharing crazy advice or protocols for free for people so that they can resonate with them. But then there's notoriously millions of things that are just rabbit holes that aren't conducive. So maybe talk a little bit about, like, what is your approach when you're working with a patient? How do you set those expectations? How are you making sure that they're following through? Like, how much of that is you versus them? And is that a dance or is it something else?
One of the first things that came to mind a lot was budget, which is a separate part of your question. But I have a lot of people that will come to me or write me or DM me and say, should I buy a sauna?
Yeah.
Should I buy a cold plunge? Should I buy this huge, expensive red light therapy setup to have? And I'm not opposed to any of it. Again, if you have the basics down. And that's where people go, oh, okay, I don't have to spend thousands of dollars on a sauna. Like, you're right, I should probably focus on this other stuff. Now, eventually, when you get there, if you want to buy a sauna, buy a sauna. I love saunas, absolutely. But it's not my starting point. And that's what I try to, when I'm working with people, like, where are you in the health spectrum? What are you willing to do? What can you afford? Honestly, what's the budget we're looking at? And I don't mean that to break their budget, but I mean, if I'm working with somebody who says, look, I'm a single mom, I have 4 kids, I'm just barely keeping my head above water, recommending buying a sauna or a cold plunge is the last thing I'm going to do, right? Like, even the number of maybe supplements or nutrients I suggest is going to be 1 or 2 max, just because of where we're at. So as a practitioner, it's my job to assess where they are in this scale and then how much change they're willing to do. Because if I say to somebody, I would like you to go on a gluten-free diet, and they say no, full stop. I'm like, all right. And then a lot of this is around education. It's not spending all this extra money in trying to rally them. It's a lot of education at this point, which does fall on me. It's my job
Yeah.
to see the big picture, see where I think what we need to do and where we need to go, convey that to them in a language at a level they understand. Not that they're not intelligent, but they're not in medicine.
Yeah.
So I've had a lot of patients who were like, oh my God, I love seeing you because you just explained it so well. Now that I understand the who, what, where, when, and why, now and like how I'm going to do it, I can do it. I'll do it. That's fine. I'll do it. And I think that sometimes gets missed because they've come from other practitioners and they're like, I don't know, I was told to do this thing and I was given these labs. I don't know what they mean and everything is confusing.
Yeah.
They're overwhelmed. So my approach was always, which is why I get so big into analogies and why I get so big into humor, because if somebody in front of me can understand it, oftentimes they'll go, okay, I'll do it. Maybe they'll do it 80% or 60%, but it's more than 50. And that's pretty solid for me. So my approach is definitely, where are they at and where do I need to meet them at? Although, truth be told, sometimes you do have to give them some tough love. Like, you need to do this for your health, straight up.
That's fair. I'm curious. I think the scenarios you're talking about, correct me if I'm wrong, is when they're making a decision and they want to move forward. Notoriously, in those situations, motivation is high because they're like, I finally made a commitment. I love Dr. Jones. She's resonating with me. She talks to me like I'm a person, which might have not been the case before. It happens a lot in the medical community, right? And so then they do it, and human nature is they get maybe a little bit better, then they're like, now I'm superhuman. Nothing can stop me. I can just go back to my old ways.
I would warn them before you even finish the question. I had been doing this for so long that I would say to people, look, you're going to get more. Well, stick with energy. You're going to get more energy. And the second you get more energy, you're going to blow it. And you cannot blow it. I need you to take the energy and put it in the energy bank because you haven't had energy in a long time. Put it in the energy bank. We're going to save it. And I need you to stop yourself. When you feel the burst that you can suddenly be superhuman and do all the things you can't, you literally can't, you have to stop. And I had so many patients come back to me and say, I'm so glad you warned me about whatever it was we were getting improvement on, because I absolutely was ready to blow it. I was absolutely ready, even GI stuff, I was absolutely ready to blow it all for pizza.
Yeah.
Because my stomach felt better. But I didn't. And I kept healing, and I was like, if you can nip it in the bud early,
yeah,
just sometimes with that education can be really helpful.
No, that's super, super true and helpful. Maybe going even a little bit further, because I think patient adherence is the number one thing. Even before I started a company in the healthcare space, everybody is like, nobody stays on programs for as long as I want, for the duration, like the intensity that I want them to. And I think unpacking that was they get better and then they just feel like they can do whatever.
Yeah.
Or they get put into situations where they're like, well, I've done so well, I deserve it. It's language like I should just treat myself. Again, this really does go back to society. It's like, you're weird if you don't eat cake at a party.
Yeah.
But it's like, that's weird. But if you're eating a cucumber, like if you hold a cucumber and eat it down the street, I think people look at you and go, what is wrong with you? Like, why are you doing that? Like, are you some kind of weirdo?
Yeah.
And it's like, we've stigmatized things that that grow out of the ground that are healthy, but everything else is a treat. Has there been any strategies that you've seen where somebody lasts for years and years and years, where they actually stick to things that have helped them?
Yes and no. So I was going to say very few, but now that I think about it, if somebody is at a health point where they've hit rock bottom,
yeah,
they usually stick with it. So if they've hit rock bottom, whether it's landed them in the hospital, whether it's been a horrific diagnosis, taken a huge toll on their livelihood, their relationships, their job, and they've gone to 180 and done better, they usually stick with it because there is no way they're going back to the way they were.
Yeah.
And that I would see over and over and over again. But for people who have maybe mildish stuff going on. They're just looking to optimize. Their friend went, everybody in their office went, so they're there because I thought, well, maybe I should get evaluated as well.
Yeah.
If it's not bothering them that much, they don't tend to stick with it. I would see them not as often, or when I would see them, they would say, well, I fell off the wagon, I'm back to my old ways. Like, we're back to my mild symptoms again. And so I think it has to be bad enough. Positivity doesn't often motivate people. It's the negativity side. That's the biggest motivating for people who say, I will never go back to feeling that way. They do it.
It's been one of my lifelong missions to figure out, like, how do we get to a point where we can artificially make people get to that point? Because, there's all these things in the news, like, guy who smoked 25 years saw his dad on his deathbed die from lung cancer, and that day he never smoked again. Or like, somebody got into a car accident and almost killed their own child because they were drunk driving, never had a drink again.
Yeah.
And it's like, that is such an extreme case that it scared the living whatever out of you, or you're like, all right, I'm just gonna go away forever. And I think a lot of human nature is like, everyone thinks they have tons of time or they'll do it someday, and that's never the truth. And you, obviously, as somebody who's changed their career multiple times and done multiple different things, know how uncomfortable those first phases can be.
Yeah.
And sometimes you get negative feedback that doesn't feel good, right? Do you have anything that you could think of where we could get there? Like, maybe is it a little bit more tough love? Is it some ways of showing people, is it really saying, like, why don't you just go visit somebody in the cancer center of a hospital and then see how much you're going to take life for granted? Like, how do we get there? Do you have any? And this is more of a philosophical than anything.
And I think it's actually much bigger than the individual person. Because think about it. In our day and age, you and I grew up having to wear seatbelts. Like, we would never think of not wearing a seatbelt. Everybody wears a seatbelt. But there's entire generations before us never wore a seatbelt. Didn't have to wear a seatbelt. It wasn't law. Nobody cared. It wasn't a big deal. And then it came from this huge top-down effect from the government and advertising and automobile makers. And all of a sudden, we all wear seatbelts, and nobody gives it a second thought. But nobody's done that with health. Nobody from the top down has come in and said, here's how you should eat, and here's how you should live your life, and here are the things you should do for not only longevity, but for health span, chronic disease, risk elimination, things like that.
Yeah.
So the individual person, absolutely, the change starts with one, but really the entire ripple you're asking about in this conversation, I think, is nobody has showed generations how to even remotely be healthy. And even then it's tricky because, like, what is health? There's crazy arguments about there of like, well, that's in a small enough dose, it won't kill you, so it's healthy. I'm like, oh, no. Just because the dose is so small that it doesn't kill me doesn't equal health. That is not good health.
Right.
I'm looking to thrive, not just die on a small dose. So that's where I think we need, and I'm actively seeing it right now, all the big conversations, even just right now in the cereal companies and the government, it's starting to happen where people are going, hey, wait a minute, this isn't good. I don't want this. Let's make global change around it. And I think that's where it has to start. If everybody in the world knew that something in health that we talk about, exercise, is good, but it was ingrained in us, then we'd have entire generations that are big into movement and exercise. But we hear about it, but it's not like everyone does it, like a seatbelt example.
Yeah.
Or even smoking, right? Everyone knows smoking's bad, but they haven't stopped cigarettes.
Right.
Imagine the day that all cigarettes or anything nicotine related in that regard is banned, and they ramp up the message. We're going to have entire generations that are not only indoctrinated that smoking is bad, but there's no access to cigarettes or anything, cigars or nicotine or anything like that.
Yeah.
And then the message would get out. Because people will argue back with me, well, everyone knows cigarettes are bad. I'm like, but they're 100% available. So people do it, of course.
I think this is interesting, right? Because I think in America, a lot of people push back on wanting things to go that way because they're like, it's the land of the free. We have freedom to choose if we want to do nicotine and smoke.
Right.
And why are you telling me otherwise, right? And it's what's also built the biggest economic boom ever is some of that thinking, not all of it. I'm just saying there's some correlations.
Companies never came to fruition because they already knew it was bad. How many companies and how many ingredients and how many things have we learned?
Yeah.
They knew it was bad and
Absolutely.
did it anyway.
They did it anyway.
It's not like this smoking cigarettes was this like ingenious production.
Totally.
Once it became mass produced, once it was, rolled and mass produced as opposed to tobacco leaves rolled a long time ago, then, they knew. And here we are.
Well, they didn't care.
They didn't care.
Is the point. And I get your point, right? It's like some people were like, this is evil. I don't care. I'm going to sell it because it's for profit. Okay. There's that viewpoint, right? It is interesting though, because I'm European. So when we moved as refugees to Canada, one of the first thing my parents said was, this food's terrible, right? Because they're like, what is this? There's like these boxes. They didn't know that. And like back then it was just everyone had like a garden in their backyard and you were kind of a farmer or somewhat related to one.
Yeah.
And they're like, I don't know what pesticides are. We used to like spray like rocks on things because bugs didn't like rocks on food. And that was there was no any of this stuff. Right. And so I guess it is difficult because it's like, just because something exists and it's bad for you, if someone willingly wants to take it, the argument would be, well, let them.
Yeah.
To your point though, the companies that made those things popular said that they're good for you, that you should smoke, and paid doctors to tell you to smoke, right?
Yeah.
So everyone's trying to influence you for some gain or some impact, and that's really going to be up to that person. But do you strongly believe that we should have like harder cutoffs with food and just be like, look, we all know this is better for us. Let's just make this call. Some people are going to argue that this is not great, but it's for the benefit of everybody, unavoidable.
Harder cutoffs for what's maybe not considered healthy, yes, but then more availability, accessibility of what is healthy and what we would call maybe good for you, And I think that's an argument that everyone doesn't have access to great food. So they're doing what they can in some cases with what they're given or what's around them. So if we're going to, it's a two-pronged approach. If we're going to cut the bad, then we need to make the good available to literally everybody. Somehow the accessibility has to be there. Like we needed the better food, so to speak, to be available. Because right now it's just not. In a lot of communities, healthy food is just not readily available. It's not readily taught to them. And so they rely on the packaged fast food, whatever you want to call it, to eat. And even if they do know, I've talked to plenty of mothers who are like, I know, but this is what I have available, or this is what we can afford for our family right now. That's a really tough place to be in. So we have to, if you're giving me the wand to wave, this is the wand that I'm waving for everything. It's not just about the type of food, but who has access to it. I want everyone to have access to it. Right? Like we're talking about health and thriving.
Totally.
Let's do it.
You bring up a good point, because when I'm traveling, notoriously, the options are not great.
Right.
I think most, even big cities, like when I'm walking down the road, most of the options are not that ideal.
Right.
And it's so the accessibility, because it's cheap, those places were able to proliferate really quickly and make that food more accessible. So I think we've talked a lot on this topic, and the answer really is, it's very complicated, right? Because there's so many, you can always say, well, this and that, and then what is the solution? So all that to say, I think, thank you for being one of the voices that's out there talking about ways you can get this done.
Absolutely.
Which is a great segue into, you've been dubbed the queen of hormones.
I'll take it.
And it's fitting. So I'd love to unpack or learn the origin story. Was there somebody that said that once to you? Was there
Probably. Unfortunately, I don't remember who it was, but I have been in and around hormones since I started medical school in 2000. Let's see here. Yeah, in 2001. around the time of the Women's Health Initiative came out, which is the big study that said hormones cause cancer and caused, a lot of women to just suddenly stop their hormones and think that all their cancer is 100% due to their hormones or any hormones that they take.
Yeah.
And my mentors at the time said, I don't think so. Like, we will understand the guidelines. We are going to understand this study. But at the same time, we cannot single-handedly blame estrogen for absolutely everything. And it turns out like that's not the case. So I have been into hormones in maybe I would say very pro-hormone for the right person for decades at this point. And that's not always been the case out in the world. A lot of doctors, a lot of OBGYNs, a lot of people who could call themselves hormone experts because they are an OBGYN or an endocrinologist were like, oh, except hormones cause cancer. And I was like, oh, that study. And now we know the study was flawed and we have a lot of information since then. I don't know if you need me to stop because that person is really loud.
Yeah. Are you hearing that?
Are they sweeping?
It sounds like they might be sweeping.
Scrubbing?
So I'm not quite hearing it in here, but I don't know.
It threw her off. So either way, yeah. We can wait a second.
That can keep going.
I don't like not having your I don't when you were in flow. So I was like, damn.
Well,
No, I can reflow. But I was like, oh, I've done enough filming to know where people are like, that's going to be picked up.
It's like
stop.
those mics won't pick it up. But I also don't know for sure that he's going to end up using this audio. Like we have different. So like.
I'm probably going to use these.
Yeah.
That's the team. Like I usually are the best.
Sometimes like you'd be surprised. Like sometimes I go to edit stuff and then like I'll be like, oh, that's gonna be the best one. But then like I go listen.
It's not.
And I'm just like, well, actually, this other one was better. Like I like to listen to them all. Sometimes you'd be surprised.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, but yeah, most likely those will be the best.
Well, you're at the end of the hallway, so hopefully she comes down and then goes.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah. There's not that much surface area out there to
surface area. That's for sure. Is this just a filming room or is this actually like your room too?
It's both.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's going to be a really crowded.
Yeah, I was thinking. Yeah, that's it.
Well, I'll move stuff around, but
don't worry about
keep
it.
The cameras in here. And
Do you
stuff.
film tomorrow as well?
Yeah.
I'm thinking I'll mark
it. And yeah, I had a much bigger room my last time. This was not bad actually. Like it's decent, but
I think you might waste this one.
no, I'll probably just sleep there and leave. We can leave this. Yeah.
Or you could just lay across the beds and just have one giant bed.
That's true. You could.
Yeah, I would say those microphones probably aren't picking it up. So it's at your discretion. You guys can start. You might want to repeat what you just said though, because I know you kind of stopped.
Oh, from the Women's Health Initiative?
You might want to just repeat your last bit if you want.
I mean, sure, if I can remember what it was. I knew where I was going, so I know what I was going to say.
Yeah. Just go there then.
Okay.
I'm sure we're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can cut it a little bit.
Okay. So if you look at that, then I've been really in hormones, prescribing hormones, studying hormones, using hormones for a long time, for 20 some years. And in there, between that and working for Dutch Test and some podcast, I think is where somebody dubbed me the Queen of Hormones. Because I just have this long history where I was raising an eye to the Women's Health Initiative and prescribing and in the lab field. And all of a sudden they said, you really seem to know hormones. You're like the Queen of Hormones. And I ran with it. If somebody else, the colleagues say it, I thought, sure, that sounds great.
Why not?
Yeah.
Let's unpack a little bit. What is I think some people get confused, right?
Yes.
Hormones get thrown around all the time. It's your hormones. My hormones are off. That's why I can't lose weight. Like all these sayings are coming out now. Let's, from you, hear it. Define a hormone for us, and then we'll dive into some of the ways that you're helping A, make them in healthier ranges, B, substitute, etc.
A hormone is essentially like a text message. It's a chemical messenger that gets released in our body and goes from point A to point B and says, do the thing. And we have over 50 hormones in our body. But when women are especially talking about, I feel hormonal, I think it's my hormones, most of the time they're talking about their predominant ovarian hormones, the estrogens, progesterone, testosterone, maybe even DHEA. And when it gets into stress, we're talking about cortisol. So while there are a whole lot of other hormones out there, those hormones, when they go into wherever they're going and bind to their receptor, like a key and a lock is a very simple analogy, then it's going to activate or deactivate something. And if it does it wrong, or you don't have enough in your system, or you have too much in your system, then that's when people say, oh, I feel so hormonal. I think it's my hormones. I can't lose weight because of my hormones. My cramps suck because of my hormones. They may not realize which hormones it is, but those are usually the hormones they're talking about.
Amazing. Again, putting it into ways people can understand. So very appreciated. You said something to me once, which was interesting. I never thought about it this way. We were talking about hormones at an event, and you said there's synthetic and then there's bioavailable.
Mm-hmm.
Could you explain what that means?
We have our own hormones in our body. That's called endogenous, E-N, endogenous. And then they can make those hormones to take as replacement from a pharmacy. So we have progesterone in our body. I can get progesterone that looks just like the progesterone in my body at a pharmacy, and it's often referred to as bio or body identical. My body sees it the same. Well, then they have hormones that are what we call synthetic. So it kind of looks like estrogen. It kind of looks like progesterone, but it's not quite. And in fact, when you look at the research, they know that those synthetic hormones can bind to receptors, but they don't fully know everything that it does. In fact, some of these synthetic hormones don't have generics because they can't categorize or quantify exactly what all it does and how many pieces and parts of it, which is really interesting to me because they still, it's allowed on the market, but they don't really fully know everything that's in it or what it does. So we call that a synthetic hormone, which are also available. So for example, the birth control pill. The hormones in the birth control pill are what we call synthetic. And while you may want or need or use the birth control pill to prevent pregnancy, it is not a hormone that looks just like the hormone in your body. But let's say you're listening to this and you're menopausal, perimenopausal, postmenopausal. Your doctor has you on progesterone. The registered brand is called Prometrium. That is the progesterone that looks just like the progesterone in your body. And so they get categorized under hormone, but even under the umbrella, they're different things.
Amazing. I did have a question on that.
Yeah.
It still was, even though it is bioavailable and your body sees it the same, it wasn't created by your body.
Yeah.
Is there any risks to that? Is there any long-term things that we don't know yet? Do you have any concerns over it? Like, how is your stance? And I know you prescribe and believe in this. And obviously the answer could be today it has such a benefit that it's worth whatever happens, but I'd love to hear from you.
Everything has side effects. And that's, I think, a big myth that came out that said, I only use bioidentical because it's perfectly safe. And safety and side effects are a little bit different. But here's an example. Progesterone, for some women, it can cause a lot of drowsiness, which is a good thing if you can't sleep, not a good thing if it lasts all day. Progesterone for some women can egg on a headache, not great. It can cause some women to feel bloated, not great. Water retention, not great. Acne, not great. So it kind of depends on the dose. So it doesn't mean it's risk-free, but it does have these extra symptoms. Estrogen, for example. Now, estrogen, of course, got all the bad rap because of breast cancer, but we do know that estrogen can worsen PMS. It can worsen breast tenderness. It can worsen heavy periods. It might worsen endometriosis if somebody has endometriosis. So it's not side effect free, but we can modulate the dose. We can connect it with progesterone to help reduce a lot of those. There's a lot of things we can do to help support the reduction of those symptoms or side effects or risks that you might get. So nothing is pure. Nothing is zero side effect. We do have to be aware of what they might cause.
This is interesting, right? Because now we're getting into, there's this whole life expectancy increase, optimization of, even if you don't want to live forever, everybody wants to live healthy until the day that they pass away. So some of these things like hormone replacement therapy, human growth hormone, peptides are now in market, controversial here or there, opinions mixed. What's your take on where this is all going? Are you very much, this is the future of medicine and how we're going to live healthy while we're older or even extend life? Are you in the camp of we need a little bit more maybe diligence around this stuff and to study it for longer? Where are you at with it?
Well, the good thing is that everything is actively being studied right now. So even if I wanted them to be studied for longer, they are. And the second thing is, I think these are absolutely a part of the puzzle or the pie, because you cannot just rely on hormones or growth hormone or peptides. Anyone who's doing any research in longevity, which really when we say longevity is your lifespan, how long you're going to live. But then there's health span. So how many of those years will you actually be healthy, mobile, cognizant, strong, all the things. So we know if I just took hormones and did nothing else in my life, I ate terribly, I never worked out, I slept bad, I chose bad habits, my health span and probably my lifespan is not going to be that great, right? So they are definitely a layer into what are the things you can do to be healthy for as long as possible. And I am all for it. I'm all for all the options for people and then letting them decide. What ultimately we're going for is to reduce the risk of what my good friend, Dr. Eve Henry, calls the 4 horsemen or 4 horsewomen, depending who you're talking to. Cancer, cardiometabolic disease, so heart diabetes, neurodegenerative disease, dementia, Alzheimer's, things like that, and diseases of frailty, osteopenia, osteoporosis. You don't want to break a hip. I don't want to break anything for that matter, something in my spine. I don't want to lose muscle mass, which is sarcopenia. So those are kind of the 4 things that if any of those or some of those 4 things happen, I know my health span and potentially my lifespan is going to go down. So I use the hormones, like you said, peptides, to layer in. How do I prevent those, have a good life, and be healthy?
Amazing. On top of doing the basics, right?
On top of always doing the basics. Yes.
That brings me into the last topic of the episode, lifespan. So living longer or potentially forever. Would you like to?
No.
Okay.
No. And I see all of the people looking to live to be 150, and God bless them. My family personally lives a very long time. 3 of my 4 grandparents lived until, late 80s, 90 into their 90s. And so I've known, short of God forbid getting hit by a bus, I'm probably going to be in my 80s or 90s that I'm going to live. And therefore, I focus really hard on the health span aspect of it for me. And I'm great with that. I don't feel like I have the need to live to be 150 to 100 years old, judging on the science we have today. But I am really happy for the people who are putting in all the effort and the work and the research behind how can we live to be 150? Because by the time I'm 150, which would be in 103 years at the time of this recording, I don't know that we're there yet with the science that I'm going to be in great condition. But I know I'm going to be in great condition when I hit 90 because I'm working hard on it. So I'm okay with that.
Last question.
Yes.
The argument here always is for people who don't necessarily want to live longer or forever. Would you want to, if you were going to die in a year and you're 95.
Thank you.
And you're 99.
Okay.
Dr. Carrie, you're gonna, because you're optimized and you're doing everything properly. You're 99.
Okay.
And we know with technology that next year is your year, so at 100. But you're healthy, vital, you love your family, you're having a good time. Your wisdom's at an all-time high because now you've had 99 years on this earth to compound that. Would you change your opinion in that moment?
I would, because I'm a survivalist as well.
Yeah.
So I'm a realist in some regard. Well, I'm an optimist first and foremost. And then under that, I'm pretty real. I'm aware my family lives a long time, so I need to get it together and focus on my health span. And then below that, I'm a survivalist, meaning I've talked to people where I said, hey, if the apocalypse hit, and they're like, oh man, I hope it hits me. Like, I do not plan to survive the apocalypse. Or they'll watch apocalyptic shows on TV and they're like, I would never survive. And I'm like, really?
Yeah.
I would thrive. I would do so well in that situation. And so if I'm 99, peak of everything, doing well, and would my opinion change? Yeah, because ultimately I'm like, let's keep going. Let's keep doing this. I don't have the give it all up tendency. My husband and I joke all the time that God forbid if there's an apocalypse, I'm not wishing this, but just God forbid. And if we're the only 2 people left in the world, we're both like, we would be less stressed and we'd be fine.
Right.
Because he's very similar in that regard. And so, and it's a funny way to think about it, that because I wouldn't have to, the only thing I have to focus on is, me, him, foraging, living. And for some reason, I don't find that stressful. So I think just at my core, I'm ready to survive, but thrive ultimately.
I love that. Well, Dr. Jones, it's been an absolute pleasure. Also, hilarity ensued. And where can people find you, connect with you? Where would you like them to go?
My website, drcarriejones.com. I am also on Instagram at dr.carriejones, and I have a YouTube at Dr. Carrie Jones.
Perfect. We'll link all that below, and it was a pleasure having you.
Thank you for having me on.
For sure.